Vialism is a hijacked religion. This is the first and only explicit fact we get from both the characters in this story and the narrative overall about the central religion practiced in Dema. Every other fact we have learned about this mysterious religion has been from either visual clues, metaphors and symbolism, or from tidbits pieced together from Dema.org. It is also one fact that has haunted me since hearing it in the I Am Clancy trailer 2 years ago. To hijack means to take control of something, often for the purposes of changing it, of redirecting it. Vialism as a hijacked religion means that the bishops took control of it and changed the core focus of it, redirected it. So the question remains, what was the original version of Vialism like? Well, it is my belief that the original form of Vialism is none other than the Bandito ideology, the beliefs our heroic group follows. Before we get into this video, I'd just like to give a heads up that this theory will discuss triggering topics relating to mental health and other sensitive content. If you are sensitive to such topics, I'd advise clicking off the video as this will be a prominent discussion throughout the theory. You are not alone, and there is help out there. Resources will be posted in the description. Stay alive. I've made a lot of bold claims in my time as a theorist on the Dema lore, some more well received than others, but I understand that this is probably going to be the one that makes most people incredibly dubious. The Banditos, after all, are the quote-unquote good guys, whilst the bishops and their use of vialism are the antagonistic forces of this story. It's hard to believe that the Banditos are actually the origin of vialism. The more you look over all the information we've received over these past 10 years, however, there is some evidence that the bishops hijacked the beliefs of the Banditos and turned them into vialism. There are a lot of parallels and similarities between the two cultures that these belief systems facilitate or encourage, for example, that can indicate that the vialism we see developed from the Bandito movement. Vialism and the Bandito movement's culture and beliefs are linked by the fact that they share aspects of Zoroastrianism, for one. For those unaware or in need of a reminder, Zoroastrianism is an Iranian religion that originates historically from the region of Greater Iran. It's already been heavily established that Zoroastrianism seems to be an inspiration for a lot of the design choices in the lore. I talked about it in my video on vultures, which is actually going to be really relevant for this theory, so if you're interested or want more of an explanation, I'd recommend checking it out. But yes, evidence that both the Bandito movement and vialism have beliefs and a culture seemingly derived from Zoroastrianism is not far-fetched as a result. On vialism's end, we have the Towers of Silence and vultures. In Zoroastrianism, these are towers that are built with the purpose of removing all the flesh and organs from the dead by leaving them out in the open for vultures to consume. After this is done, the bones that remain are moved into the central pit to be further weathered by the elements. This is done to prevent the pollution of the earth, water, and fire. Zoroastrians consider these elements sacred, whilst dead carcasses are considered to be unclean and polluting. It is, fundamentally, a take less and give more approach to the environment. Vultures are necessary to facilitate this process of excarnation, with the Parsi communities actually noting that the decline of vultures has led to an inability to carry out these rites. Hoshangkapadia stated, "We've lost our way of life, our culture." In Dema, we know that their towers aren't for aesthetic purposes. The bishops did not just look at Zoroastrianism and decide their towers were sick as hell. They have been created for religious purposes. The fact that the bishops themselves, a bishop being a religious figure in Christianity, not only solely reside in these towers, but represent each tower, gives them some religious connotation and importance to vialism. They are a symbol of the bishops, an area for the bishops. and thus are naturally religious in nature. You could also argue that these towers function in a similar way as they do in Zoroastrianism. It can be argued that the bishops use these towers to store or break down the dead bodies they plan to or have already seized, as they cannot bury or dig up dead vessels that they intend to or have used without revealing the secret of vialism to the citizens. And aside from being used to spy, it is probably this need to cover up the secret of vialism that also results in the abundant amount of vultures being widely accepted within the culture of Dema as just living there. One of the pictures on Dema.org seems to imply that they are seen on the towers, and the caption "Death Eaters" further suggests that their purpose is to keep the lie of vialism alive by excarnating seized bodies stored in the towers. The Dema towers and the presence of vultures, whilst not strictly functioning to carry out religious traditions or upholding religious rules like the Towers of Silence preventing pollution to the elements, have the purpose of keeping the lie of the religion of vialism functioning, and thus do function to assist the religion as a result. They affirm the illusion of the religion's purpose, allowing vialism to function, consequently meaning that the towers and vultures are instruments of the religion, not just propaganda. Similarly, the Bandito ideology also clearly places an importance on vultures in their culture. As we see in Levitate, the Banditos do clearly live alongside, or at the very least respect, vultures in their camp. This respect and coexistence clearly comes from the Bandito ideology, not just because they also thought it looked sick as hell, given the fact that the Banditos also use vultures as a symbol of their movement. They do actually have detailed beliefs regarding vultures, which further affirms that their coexistence with vultures is due to their belief system, rather than external factors. But I'm gonna go into that a bit more in the next section. Moreover, the Banditos also clearly respect the home of vultures, or at the very least regard it as part of their belief system. In his FPE letter to Bricka, Preston mentions a vulture tree. The fact that he mentions it casually as a location rather than as a new discovery suggests that this is an area the Banditos are already well acquainted with. It is also capitalized, elevating the location to a proper noun, depicting some level of importance to the Banditos. Moreover, in the I Am Bandito Spotify game, we can see this tree noted down in the section pertaining to the vulture symbol. This suggests that the vulture tree is as important a symbol to them as the vultures are. But yes, vultures, as a result, are part of their traditions and lifestyle demanded by the Bandito ideology. They are part of their culture, much like it is in Zoroastrianism. The Banditos also have natural light as central to their culture and ideological beliefs, kind of like Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrians believe fire is a sacred element, symbolizing wisdom and truth, so much so that they have temples dedicated to fire and purification. The Banditos also seem to hold fire and natural light as a symbol of truth, hence why they don't simply just use it for practical reasons. In the explainer for the Compass E pitchfork on I Am Bandito, it is stated that the flipped E is a symbol of revealing the truth, and East is Up is not only a message of unity, but also of truth itself. East is where the sun rises, which links notions of natural light to the truth consequently, and this includes fire. So we see here that under the Bandito ideology, fire and natural light are not only a practical tool for basically a bunch of campers, but also a symbol that represents certain core beliefs of the ideology. It is clear as a result that the Bandito ideology and vialism share the similarity of having features of Zoroastrianism within their culture. It is an umbrella that links them both. Aside from having a linked origin in their culture, the Bandito ideology and vialism also share certain beliefs, or at the very least they share certain topics of beliefs, kind of like how some religions have similarities in the belief of a god or afterlife, but differences in what that god looks like or what the afterlife is like and how to get there. For the Banditos and the bishops, they have very similar perspectives, beliefs, and general focuses that we can infer from their symbols and motivations. In general, these two groups have beliefs that focus on life, death, and rebirth. An example of where the focus is the same, but the details of the beliefs are different, is the differences in approaches to life and death. Vialism seemingly believes in devaluing life and celebrating death. We know this from the fact that citizens of Dema are referred to as vessels, as well as the fact that the bishops enforce a culture of collectivism, ensuring everyone wears similar clothing alongside assigning numbers to them as if to remove any sense of individuality and uniqueness that makes people, that gives their lives individual worth. This signifies that their lives are not important in the grand scheme of vialism. Furthermore, the language around features of vialism, specifically the use of glorious to refer to their festivals, those who have passed, and even in what seems to be segments of religious prayers and statements, affirms this idea that vialism specifically celebrates the death of its followers, and actively encourages it. In contrast, the song Neon Gravestones establishes the stance of the Bandito ideology, as the lyrics deconstruct and criticize the practices and perspectives we literally see vialism utilize and endorse. This notion of celebrating life and dedicating themselves towards it is also seen in the explanation of the double bar logo in the I Am Bandito Spotify game. Let us overturn this concept as a symbol of dedication to and celebration of life. It must also be noted that both groups utilize a symbol of rebirth to identify their faith. Vultures symbolize notions of rebirth largely due to their ability to feed off of death to keep living. Furthermore, we see both groups seemingly explicitly following this idea of rebirth too, not just embedding it into their belief system through symbols. The Banditos seemingly believe in a spiritual rebirth. In the description of the vulture symbol in the I Am Bandito game, it explicitly mentions a symbol of our responsibility to turn death into life. May we learn from what we've lost and commit to living. As stated earlier, vultures are considered a symbol of rebirth due to this ability to turn death into life. And it is this characteristic that aligns not only with the beliefs of the Bandito movement, but is the reason why vultures were chosen to represent them. This is also reaffirmed in the lyrics of Overcompensate, with Clancy stating, "overtaking your former self." Meanwhile, the bishops explicitly take this idea of rebirth more literally in the lore, through the process of seizing. It quite literally allows them to renew their life or transfer themselves into new bodies. They are quite literally doing exactly as the vultures are. They are feeding from death in order to keep living. Once again, we clearly see that it is entirely possible for vialism to have derived from and be a hijacked version of the Bandito ideology, given the similar beliefs or identical beliefs and differences in practice. This theory also has logical, practical evidence in the form of the story itself. The FPE letters and ending of City Walls all reinforce this idea that the Bandito ideology was hijacked and became vialism. We know that Nova and the new bishops want to do better than their predecessors. Of course, we have both the secret message in the US FPE letters of "if we become them, we must do better," as well as Torchbearer's affirmations, knowing full well what Clancy plans to do, that they must do better as proof of such. And in one of his final FPE letters, Clancy states that he wants to snap the citizens out of the lifeless obedience they have become trapped in. He acknowledges that the city needs hope, something echoed by Clancy in some of his earliest Dema.org letters as something the bishops purposefully starve them of. Not only is this proof that Clancy wants to do better, as he is dismantling the old bishop regime to make life better, freer, and happier for the citizens, but it is also clear that the ideology he is following to achieve this is, in some form, the Bandito ideology, just slightly different. After all, talk about hope and freedom from lifeless obedience, from structure and entrapment, is pretty much one of the core motivations and beliefs of the Bandito ideology. They want to free the city, whilst the bishops want to keep it under totalitarian rule. They always have hope, and their beliefs inspire it in others, whilst vialism purposefully sows despair and helplessness to function and maintain its control. So yes, Nova and the new bishops utilize some form of the Bandito ideology to justify and motivate their solution to the Dema problem of overthrowing the former bishops and establishing a new regime. A solution born from the disagreement with the Banditos as to how to solve the problem effectively. The ending of City Wars also makes it apparent that this story is a cycle. The reappearance of the Heavy Dirty Soul instrumental and Torchbearer's discussion about finding Clancy out there and trying again all reaffirms this. So, if this story is a cycle, that means that Nova will become Nico, and that regardless of what good the new bishops try to do, they will inevitably circle back to the way Dema was, with just a potential few differences. This also means that the Bandito ideology to do better that the new bishops follow will eventually devolve into some form of vialism, because this is a cycle. Hell, this isn't even speculation. We start to see the Bandito ideology become fundamentally warped and hijacked by some Banditos in the FPE letters. Boulder quite literally calls for Clancy to rule Dema through the justification of the Bandito ideology, through the fact that they were better, more powerful than the bishops. It is clear that the Bandito ideology was already becoming warped by some who were taken by Clancy's strength. So, by the evidence we see in the FPE letters and the rules of the cycle, logically, if Nova and the new bishops are using the hijacked Bandito ideology as their belief system to rule, that belief system can and will become vialism. It has the capability of being warped, and it will be. There are some glaring issues with this theory, however, but I'm going to attempt to provide some explanations for them, and it's up to you as to whether you believe they are believable enough. The first criticism to this theory is if Nova intends to do better, especially after suffering under vialism himself, why would he eventually go to enforcing it again? Isn't that the very antithesis of the Bandito ideology he uses to justify his position? Why on earth would he allow the Bandito ideology to become vialism? Well, it is possible that Nova would enforce vialism under the belief and justification that it was doing better. We know that the bishops aren't simply just evil. Keon's existence is not the only proof of that. Tari's letter in the EU FPE leg explicitly states that the bishops claim that everything they do is to protect them. It is a twisted form of love that the citizens do not necessarily recognize. Of course, that could be propaganda. That could be a lie. So even if we ignore the behaviour of the previous bishops that we have seen in the story, the lyrics of City Wars establishes that Clancy's departure from the Banditos and acceptance of the role of Nova Bishop is not one born out of evil or selfish desires. As seen in my City Wars analysis, this arrogance and hubris he exhibits in these lyrics, as well as in the FPE letters where he states he will take control, is later revealed to be overcompensation to mask his anxieties, uncertainty, and exhaustion, so that he can successfully overcome Nico, so that he can convince the Banditos to place their confidence in him, to reassure himself, and to ignore the struggles he still suffers from after facing extreme isolation in Scaled and Icy. Moreover, we also established in the City Wars analysis that Clancy specifically chooses a different route from the Torchbearer because he is tired of fighting. He believes that he must take on the burden of solving this problem by himself thanks to the perceived abandonment he faced in Psy. This imposed isolation only leads to exhaustion, resulting in him being too tired to fight anymore and too tired to truly see a way out of Dema. Hence why he resigns himself to becoming a bishop and trying to improve the city through ruling it himself. These are not the inherent motivations of someone who is, and always will be, pure evil and self-serving. So, what reasons would Clancy, as the Nova Bishop, have for ever re-establishing the unhealthy religion of vialism, or some varied form of it? This is going to be a bit speculative, as we really don't know the true motivations of the bishops, aside from inferences. But there are a few reasons I can think of as to why Nova himself would believe that vialism and its dark truth is ultimately for the city's benefit. The first reason could be that Nova is still trying to break the cycle for good, just like what he and Torchbearer initially initially planned with the liberation of the city and potential destruction of Dema. Perhaps by setting up a system that keeps him immortal, it is giving him time to figure out how to break the cycle for good. Another potential reason could be that he simply isn't aware that he is imposing something akin to vialism again. Much like how in mental health, we may not always be aware that methods we use to do better, to cope with our struggles, actually end up becoming unhealthy mechanisms that do harm. There is a third reason. As already established, the extreme isolation, imprisonment, exploitation, and starvation suffered in Scaled and Icy by Clancy was an experience he never really healed from, arguably only worsened by the realization that he was on his own until the events of navigating. This fostered a belief that he had to deal with his problems alone, that he had to beat Nico and sort the Dema problem out on his own. This notion is affirmed in Clancy's final letter. He believes only he can provide the city with the hope they need to feel free. Only he can be their example of absolute power, the power that the city needs to feel again in order to be liberated. We initially took these statements to be misguided, arrogant, cocky, and power-hungry, but with the new context that City Walls provides us, it actually presents a far more sad picture as to what Clancy was saying. If Clancy believes he is the only provider of Dema's freedom, or that he must take on this burden himself, and that is clearly the only way to do better, it would make sense to set up a system of vialism to keep him and the Niners alive for as long as possible. In fact, ignoring any specific reasoning for a second, this idea that Clancy would simply re-establish some form of vialism in a misguided attempt to do better could finally explain why the Bourbaki group is so central to the lore, rather than just being a neat little Easter egg or just a source of inspiration for the bishops. The fate of the bishops directly parallels the fate of the Bourbaki group. The group itself was formed in response to the consequences of the First World War, wherein many young French mathematicians died, resulting in university instructors having to utilize dated, archaic texts. After hearing complaints about the inadequacy of these texts, André Weil set up the Bourbaki group to write a modern analysis textbook. Ultimately, they aimed to improve and modernize the state of mathematics, to revolutionize it, and push forward new ideas to allow the subject to keep growing. They aimed to do better in the field of mathematics after the loss of a generation of mathematicians and the consequential reliance on old, rigid ideas. Despite all of this, however, the Bourbaki group eventually became that which they had initially sought out to cure. The group were noted to have a very elitist culture. Douay Don stated that the success of the Bourbaki group led to snobbery for pure mathematics at the expense of applied mathematics. In fact, their influence over mathematics was considered so stifling that some emigrated to the US to escape such influence. In the end, whilst the Bourbaki group was successful in their goal of modernizing mathematics, it cannot be understated that their influence also stunted the growth of mathematics due to elitist ideas of what forms of math were worth pursuing. You could say, in a way, that their snobbery over what forms of math were worth pursuing resulted in an inadequacy in mathematical material available by restricting what was explored. And doesn't that sound familiar? After a period of great suffering, a group comes together with the aim of doing better, technically achieving that goal early on, before unfortunately becoming part of the problem they initially set out to solve. They became so much of a problem, in fact, that people leave their home country just to escape their influence. Ultimately, what we have seen in the lore, and the influences surrounding the lore, suggest that it is possible Nova re-establishes vialism out of a misguided attempt to do better. That Nova would allow the Bandito ideology to become warped into the very thing he fought against, regardless of whether this was intentional or not. Of course, there is another hole to this theory, that being that I Am Torchbearer establishes that the Banditos and their ideology was formed in response to the tyranny of the bishops and vialism. How can the Bandito ideology be the original form of vialism if the Bandito ideology came after vialism? Well, The cycle might also answer that as well. This is 1,000 times more speculative, but it could be possible that the Bandito movement dies out every cycle after the loss during city wars, and reappears at some point in the new cycle. We see in the letter between Bricker and Preston that they find a cave containing proof that there have been other escapees and rebels long before the Bandito movement came into existence. It looks old, very old, carved long enough ago to now be weathered and smoothed over. This fight against vialism is not new, and our rebellion, it appears, has been going on for ages. Considering the Banditos are the only group we know actively live in Trench, not just as escapees, but as rebels that fight against Dema and vialism, paired with what we know about the cycle and how it functions, it is entirely possible that these carvings could be from a previous cycle and a previous Bandito group. This does lead to a chicken and the egg situation though. When the first cycle happened, what came first? The Bandito movement or vialism? And we know that each cycle has some form of differences. They aren't exactly the same. So would these variances impact what we know of the timeline of the story? That I don't necessarily have an answer to. So I will leave it to you to decide whether you think that this theory and the arguments surrounding it are compelling or not. And that is it for this theory. Oh my god, it has been so long since I have written and recorded a scripted video. I've missed doing this so much. I've just had a lot going on in my personal life. It's been hectic, but man, I am finally free. I really do hope the wait was worthwhile, for several reasons actually. First of all, because I know it's been ages, and I feel really bad for leaving you guys for that long without a recorded video that has a lot more effort put into it rather than just news updates. The other reason is that this video was an absolute nightmare to make, so all the effort that I've put into it really needs to be worth it. Long story short, back in December I had to get a new phone, because for the past 5 years I have been using the same phone to record all my videos, and it eventually started flatlining. My new phone doesn't have a headphone jack, which is what my microphone uses to connect to my phone. So I had to order a wireless microphone. I recorded the video, my microphone broke, and not only that, what I had recorded was absolutely god-awful quality. So what I've had to do is I've had to fish out my old phone, charge it up, record this on my old phone, and then transfer it via Google Drive so I can access it on my new phone. So yes, a lot of love went into this video because I only want you guys to have the best. But yes, I really, really hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for waiting for me. And thank you for watching Top Debate.